It's that he's lost very close games, Danya. It almost makes it worse, right? He's not even converting when he has a chance, and that's a problem.
It definitely makes it worse, because if you're losing by one-move blunders, and yeah, technically he lost the last game with a one-move blunder, but it was already bad. If you're losing because you're not getting out of the opening, or you're blundering, you can make active changes. You can steer the game in a different direction. You can change your openings. But when the problem is occurring below the surface, when you're getting what you want and then still losing, it makes it harder to make in-match adjustments. And I'm really curious how Wesley is going to handle, the most difficult moment of his SCC run thus far, as we see a very tactical Rosalimo Sicilian with a B takes C6 variation. Danny, it's more common to take with the D pawn to open up the light squared bishop, but Magnus, I think, just going for the kill.
Yeah, and he's playing a very sharp line that objectively is pretty good for White. We see that only pawns have moved here for Black because the knight was traded. White has a big center, a queen in the middle of it, and pieces coming. So objectively, White is a little better, but as Danya said, it's kind of more Magnus going for the kill here, because this is one of those games that's going to be super double-edged. And if he gets another victory in a really sharp Sicilian, having chosen, I'll just quickly show it, to play B takes C6 here instead of the D takes C6 more solid lines, then that could really spell more disaster for So. Here comes E5 from Magnus.
Okay.
What a wild one we're going to have here.
And we're likely going to get that G8 knight ferried over to F7. Knight G8 to H6 to F7 is very standard in this line. And then Magnus has to make sure that he's covering all of the weak squares in his position. I mean, obviously his structure is a little bit flimsy, but it's simultaneously flimsy, but also very, very solid. If you imagine a black pawn on D6, he's got this whole D6, E5, F6, G6 pawn cocoon, and that does make it difficult for White to infiltrate. I actually think that if both sides are able to complete their development, Danny, we might switch from a tactical battle to a more positional game. By the way, knight takes E5 here needs to be calculated. I don't think it has any chance of working, but that might be what Wesley's thinking about as he drops his queen to C3.
I think we should analyze that real quick. I want to show on the analysis board, because I think especially for most of the viewers, knight takes E5 is the tactic that is like, wait, is this a puzzle rush moment?
Queen A5.
Knight takes E5, just to point out, the problem is that if you take, we have a little shake and bake, and the rook is hanging. But the issue is when you take on E5, always look for your opponent's threats before you assume a tactic works. Queen A5 check actually just picks up a piece for Black. So anyway...
So that's why he played a queen c3. Now he's actually threatening knight takes e5, and Magnus can't play knight h6 here, which is the move you want to play. So I think he's going to have to go bishop g7 or go knight e7 or d6 maybe because of that threat.
Or rook to b8.
Oh, Daddy, what are you preparing, Daddy? Why can't I take on e5 there?
Hey, I just brought little tricks today, right? Silly Danny tricks are for kids. No, but I'll add something else to what you said, because I think if Black does develop, you pointed out that Black's position is very solid, but I'll say it's also very flexible, and let's not forget that Black has the bishop pair. That's partly what you gained in order to lose development, and if a position slowly becomes more and more open, whether that is on the queen side with diagonals, whether it's with d5, what you're counting on is that Black actually has the better minor pieces, despite those pieces being undeveloped at this time and the other problems. So, wow.
The word, Danny, that comes to mind when I look at d5 is brazen. I think that's the best word to describe what Magnus is doing right. Not a single piece developed, and the guy is opening his center, allowing queen c6 check, which would cause most people to reject d5 on the spot. But obviously, he's looked one step further, bishop d7, and I think he's going to try to get his pieces out quickly. But Magnus didn't do this because he liked his position. He actually did it because he thought it was necessary to supercharge his development, even at the cost of a pawn.
Yeah, he did hang the pawn. White is better materially, which is why you see that edge there. But again, I want to say he did it because he's like, well, my only real strength in the position is the bishops. Let's get an open position where there's some play and maybe some tactics. If White plays best, this really should be maybe the first win for Wesley So. Fingers crossed. But otherwise, Magnus is looking for activity for the bishops.
Okay, so bishop g7 here is the obvious move, but Magnus thinking, I think, about bishop to b5 also, preventing White from castling, and this is what you got to do in a bad position. You got to make these micro problems for your opponent, also to try to get him to burn clock. But Magnus is burning his own clock right now. Queen a5 check, and queen a6, I think, is his idea.
Yeah.
Same concept.
He likes your idea, but with a different piece that moves diagonally,
Which one would that be? Not the bishop?
I was going to say, there is 3. One that captures diagonally, but the scientific breakthrough is that they have combined the rook and the bishop together, and it is called the queen.
Ooh. Interesting. I like the way you're thinking right now. And when will this piece make its debut in modern chess?
I've heard it's coming your way to a chessboard near you. Rook and bishop have combined together.
Fun factoid, Danny. Really quickly before we analyze this endgame, the queen used to be the weakest piece on the board in the old Persian and Indian form of chess called shatranj. The queen would move 1 square diagonally in any direction. And the Russian word for queen is fers, which is not actually a Russian word. It only means chess queen, and it comes from the Persian for vizier, because the queen actually used to be a male figure. In ancient Persia, the king's closest advisor was called the vizier, and that is why the vizier was weaker than the king, because the hierarchy had to be preserved. And then when chess came to Europe, partially due to the influence of Queen Isabella, the queen became the most powerful piece on the chessboard. Okay, we have a game to analyze. I apologize.
That was an amazing chess history lesson, and I knew those things, but it's fun to hear someone frame it in a different way. And Queen Isabella changed the game for the queen, and now she's the most dominant. This is great.
The knight on d5 is dominant.
Knight on d5 is dominant. Wesley's up a whole pawn. Like, this is not even a pawn with compensation. As Yasser would say, it's a pawn and the compensation. It is a 2-on-1 majority. You convert this game now, or Danya walks out of here, Wesley. Let's go.
You have to convert that. I mean, this is a dream
You have to
position.
convert this game.
And Danny, step on the gas pedal. Play. I don't like b3. I thought rook ac1 might have been almost winning on the spot, because that rook was infiltrating to c7. You gave up b2 with check, but the king would have dropped back to f1. This gives Magnus the tempo. He can use it to try to cover all of the holes in his position and ultimately jump to b4 with his knight. If he can eliminate Wesley's d5 knight, the technical task facing Wesley becomes all that much more difficult.
Yep. No, that's totally true. This was a defensive move rather than best defense as a good offense. Wesley has to keep the pressure here, especially before black completes development, right? You want to play tempo moves when your opponent is off balance, and you got to keep the pressure here. By the way, rook ac1 still just has to be what the doctor ordered here. Let's get our pieces actively making threats.
But I'm still harping on that moment where Wesley could have played rook c1 2 moves ago and gotten his rook to the 7th rank. Now I think we're going to see knight b4, and we do. Wesley wants knight c4, perhaps, and we're going to get some sort of transformation if Magnus takes on d5 and then maybe goes rook d7 and starts going after the d5 pawn.
It's still a good position for Wesley, but I agree. You hate having those games where you keep saying things like, that's still okay, but it's not as good as it could have been. Oh, you're still winning, but maybe not as winning as you were. Those are not words that you want to have come out of a commentator's mouth.
No, definitely.
All right, bishop d7 played. Wesley is still better, again, even if not as good as it maybe could have been. I think this transition's been helpful for white.
Yeah, he should win this game. Knight a5, knight c6 is a big idea. I think I wouldn't be able to resist the temptation. Knight a5 also opens up the pathway to this c7 square. Magnus might respond with a check on b5, but then the king has actually the f3 square, which is very important. And we
bring it.
Hide on g3. The king is safe, and I think he's also going to push a4 on the queen side. I think Wesley back on track here.
Agreed. a4, knight c6 a move, even d6 a move at some point where you're threatening rook c7 and just kind of getting straight forward and jiggy with it over there. d6, rook c7, a7 will fall at the end of a line. So there's a lot of pressure coming to Magnus, who now is under 40 seconds on the clock.
From a distance, I think Magnus might have been relying on g4 check, and it's kind of a cutesy move. You can't really take on g4 because of the fork on e2, but the king can hide amongst the trees there on g3, and black is way too slow to generate kingside counterplay. I think we might see g4 just for good measure, but that's not going to create a counterplay that seriously countervails what's going on the queen side. I think this might be Wesley's first win. Okay, e4, but I think you can actually take that.
Yeah, I think you kind of need to, because it's harder to hide in the trees if you don't take it.
Yeah, no more trees.
You might get in trouble. Yes. Yeah.
Speaking of trees, don't get yourself mated.
So bishop comes to e2. He can just move the rook, I think, to attack the bishop. He does. Yeah.
Okay, now knight c6. Get the e7 square so that there's no nasty little check with the rook. I would go knight c6 prophylactically.
I was looking at, there was a way to punch the pawn. There really isn't tactically yet. You don't want to do that. So yeah, the king is in danger. Nice c6. I love it. It also, by the way, does threaten the a7 pawn.
But watch the clock. This is exactly what Magnus wants. If it gets into a time scramble, black has practical chances. Rook c8, an excellent alternative. Knight c6 now, and I think Wesley a couple of accurate moves away as Magnus tries to prepare f5 check.
Wow.
And I guess king
Bishop
e3.
c5. What a simplifying move.
Oh, king e3 is so nice. The rook defends the bishop on c5. No discovery.
And go back to e4 now after this check. It just sits pretty in the center. I love bishop c5, even if knight c6 was better. What a nice way to simplify the game if you're Wesley So. Just take it. You're eliminating tactics.
And that was so nice, Danny, how he took the bishop on c5. You could have also taken the rook, but that was a lot more complicated. This is much easier to play. Rook e2. Just don't give up that d5 pawn, and you're golden.
Yeah. It's not over yet, but Wesley So converts this. It has been the most complete start to finish game for him in the match, and a very good sign for Wesley So fans out there.
Really only one mistake to not play rook ac1 gave Magnus some practical chances, but after that Wesley never looked back and look at how he finishes the game, counterattacking the rook. The final blow.
Very nice move.